Good afternoon. We'll call today's Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone.
Present.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderwoman Keys. Vice Chair Saunier. Alderman Aldridge. Alderman Browning.
Present.
Chair Clark Hubbard.
Here.
We have five present. We have a quorum.
All right, this is our first meeting for this legislative session, so we have no approval of minutes, but I would like to take the opportunity to welcome our new member, Alderwoman Keys, to the HUD's committee. Welcome and services. Okay, what we'll do today is go ahead and jump to the agenda. Actually, is Alderwoman Boyd online?
She is not.
Okay. So what we'll do, I did hear from Alderman Aldridge that he is on his way in. So those are the two that we do need present. Okay, here's Alderman Aldridge. Perfect timing. You can go straight to the podium. And while he's walking up, Madam Clerk, can you read the summary for Board Bill 23 for him while he's getting settled?
Board Bill 23, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge and President Green, an ordinance revising ordinance number 71840, which established the Impact Tenant Fund, amending Section 1 to update tenant eligibility criteria, and authorizing the use of fund monies for administrative costs.
Thank you, Madam Clerk and members of the HUD's committee. As Madam Clerk has read, Board Bill 23 is just updating a bill that we passed here at the board that I believe Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, our chair, actually sponsored to make sure that we add language to ensure that people that has been devastated by this tornado, mainly tenants, can also tap into this tenant fund. It was after being in Budget Committee, Deputy Director Valerie Russell from the Department of Human Services brought up this concern that the language probably needs to be opened up, and just to be safe for individuals that have been affected by the tornado. You know, when Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and this board, I think, unanimously passed this, we didn't expect a disaster would be hitting, but just to ensure that residents and tenants that have been impacted by the tornado can be able to tap into this tenant fund if home is condemned, where the city will assist with first or last month's rent can also be eligible for this fund. There's a lot of other moving parts that are coming down the pipeline, but this was one way I believe, we as the board working hand in hand with the mayor's office, who also supports this legislation, can show the urgency. I always say government is slow, and there's been a need first to assess the situation, be out there and help residents, and just to make sure that resources on the ground. But I think what today is showing is that the board is, from the local stand, is trying to do our part where legislation is possible to be able to be done to help those individuals that have been most impacted by the tornado. So again, this is just opening up the eligibility. We did add language that there will be just a 5% administrative fee. Most likely it would be Employment Connections that would be administering this, and they would need some funds from it to be able to make sure that they have the staff, which also is another recommendation from Ms. Russell to ensure that as they administer the program, that there is a little bit of funding to make sure that they have the staff to do so. With that, I would open up for any questions from the committee.
Thank you so much, Alderman Aldridge. You know I believe in giving credit where it's due. So while I did carry it this past time, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I picked up the baton from former Alderwoman Ingracia, who passionately held it on the floor. And I was grateful for the opportunity to do that. And we almost got unanimously, but maybe we'll get it this time, right?
Yes,
Under these other circumstances. Thank you, because we know that our renters have been impacted in this in a different way. from our homeowners, and we know that wholeness is going to look different for everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think we continue to stand in support of our renters down here at the Board of Aldermen in unique ways that we can. So this legislation is one of them, and I thank you. I didn't know if you wanted to bring up anyone from the mayor's office to speak on it before we open up for questions. Or?
I'll have Ms. Millbrook from the mayor's office, policy director extraordinaire, also touch on it and maybe talk about the mayor's support on this piece of legislation.
Great. Ms. Milberg.
Good afternoon. For the record, Casey Milberg, Policy Director. I think that's as far as I'll commit to that, but I'd be happy to have you ask the mayor job title. The mayor's office is grateful for this really smart, common sense update to this program. It will be easy to administer. So you all know we have already set up meetings with DHS, or we will be setting up meetings with DHS between now and the potential bill passage date to make sure that should this bill pass and be signed by the mayor, that it will be ready programmatically to be implemented as soon as we can stand it up. As everyone is aware, this is a high-density area that this tornado went into. We have a lot of renters up there who, were impacted by this, as well as homeowners, and we are certainly aware of that. And I want to make sure there's that awareness too, and we're holding space for that. But in terms of the good that we're able to do, just with some immediate short-term items, this is really smart policy. We're fully supportive. We're fully ready to implement, and we will be working to stand this up as quickly as we can get it to make sure that we can get some folks some immediate aid. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to Alderman Aldridge and the board president's office, and happy to answer questions if you guys have them for me.
Thank you so much. We'll start with, go back here by seniority, Alderman Cone.
No questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being legislative. The initial $100,000 for this was from American Rescue Funds, correct? Have there been more allocations and I've missed them, or no?
No, it's just this, it's this $100,000 to this fund. It has not been touched, so it still stands in this fund in its totality.
Okay. And it does allow
If I
for,
could jump in, the 100 is from the ARPA. Right now in the budget for FY26, there is scheduled for another additional 160,000 that will be going to this fund. And we'll say the budget committee will be doing amendment markup soon. So, always maybe can add more, but there is funds scheduled for the FY26 budget as well, outside of the ARPA money that set up the program.
okay, great. And then in the bill, the money goes to pay 1 month rent of an eligible unit. Is that, I know we're not touching that, so this is basically people will apply through the program as it's set up with, Employment Connection or whoever. I'm sure it's bid out in some way. And so they would apply and be able to get, if they, pass through the application the first month, a 1 month rent assistance, basically, is the idea. Just so everyone knows what we're talking about when we talk about what the fund does. I appreciate that. I think this is a great thing to allow for this to be included. With these sort of natural disasters, we don't know how many of these we're going to be seeing, and what will change. And so it's even a greater need to have this safety net available. So I appreciate the time, and I'm looking forward to supporting this today.
Thank you. Alderman Brownie. I'm sorry, I forgot we have our new member, Alderwoman Keys.
Oh, thank you so much. Just a quick question. So these funds, Employment Connection will be administering them. Will they be sending those funds directly to, I guess, apartments, instead of giving it directly to the individual? How will those funds be dispersed?
Sure. The way the program is currently set up, it goes to that individual. The original idea for this legislation came about due to, trying to find a way to help support tenants who, through no fault of their own, had a property manager who maybe didn't do the best job in keeping up the property, and such that it had to be condemned and they had to move out suddenly. So the program has been stood up for that reason, to provide assistance directly to that individual. I imagine that would continue in this circumstance, just because, you know, you're going to have properties that are just completely destroyed. It is an individual assistance program, so we would expect that to continue.
Thank you. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
So noted.
Thank you.
That's good news. Alderman Browning?
Thank you. I think my colleagues have asked the good questions about how people apply and how it works, and that was mainly what I was concerned about as well, is just to make sure. I guess my only question is, you said that the amount from previously had been untouched. Is that just because you think more people need to be aware of this, or was it not available for them at the time, or why haven't we dug into this so far?
Yeah, I know that it was something where I think there was a bit of visibility of the program. Hadn't yet been, you know, fully built out, to be very candid with you. That's something that, of course, is already changed dramatically by virtue of the tornadoes. So a little bit of visibility, and then I know that there were some of the finer details of building out this in the most, you know, efficient and targeted way that were still being worked through as part of that. I know that there were some, you know, we have a wonderful Department of Human Services. I know the thinking of bringing employment connections in is because, you know, they have a small but mighty powerhouse of a team over there. So the hope is with, you know, with this build out, with the expansion for natural disaster, with making sure that there is funding for that administrative side of things, that, you know, between now and should this come to the mayor's desk for her signature, that a lot of those visibility issues, as well as those fine, you know, those fine details that had still needed to be worked out, can be addressed fairly expeditiously. And then employment connections can be ready to go very rapidly with the visibility piece in partnership with the city, and having everything they need to confidently administer this program.
That's great. I hope that those resources can be shared with us as alder people, just to make sure that we can pass them on. I have people in my inbox right now who are asking about their apartments that were made uninhabitable by the tornado. And obviously, it's not easy to come up with a full month's rent to put down a security deposit for a new place while you're still waiting on maybe getting yours back from your previous situation, or just, you know, wondering if you're going to even get that back, especially in the middle of a disaster, a time of crisis. It's great that our city can be here for people and provide this very basic need, which is the need to have shelter. So also very happy to support this, and also ask that I be added as a co-sponsor.
So noted.
Thank you. Vice Chair Sanye?
I first just want to thank you all for the work on this. I was excited the first time that I came in, we were having these conversations, and you know, I think the tragedy is really unfortunate, but I do think it's important that people realize how close all of us are to being displaced and needing to quickly relocate, and how difficult that can be. I did just want to ask some questions, not necessarily about this, but I know we have a lot of homes, the 10th mentioned earlier, and there's certainly going to be some folks in the community, and I've already heard a little bit of the chatter about, you know, what are we thinking in terms of them? So I would love if, and it might be a question for you, Director Milberg, if you wanted to speak to what the mayor's office is thinking in terms of, you know, I understand, you know, we've had conversations, I know we've chatted, but just wanted to put it on the record so that the public could understand what we're thinking in terms of why we're moving on tenants and not also moving on something for homeowners right now, and what the long-term thinking is there.
Sure, and thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about that. Tenants, homeowners, no matter where you live, no matter how you were able to secure housing, if you were housing insecure, if you were an unsheltered resident, you're important to us and you matter, and we're going to keep on going to the mat for you to make sure that you have safe, stable housing as quickly as we can. So on this piece, the reason we are moving on the rental side of it now is because this is funding that's already appropriated, it's available, enough of the parameters have already built out in a way that we feel confident that we can administer in partnership with Employment Connections. So this is really this is a real quick A to B that we can get mobilized right now, that we know is going to work, that we know is going to get out quickly to help people in need. In terms of the homeowner piece, yes, we are certainly taking a look at that, and we do have every intention of, whether it's supporting the special session that the governor announced today. that some folks are nodding in here. For those not aware, Governor Parson called a special session that will begin Governor Kehoe, my goodness, called a special session. Thank you, Governor Kehoe. We're very appreciative of everything you've done. To begin June 2nd. As part of that, there are two provisions that we are very supportive of. One will provide support through a program through Missouri Housing Development Corporation, a program that's already stood up. So it's not like there's going to be a buildup or any buildup time at all, but to support homeowners who were uninsured. There's an application process. It would be an additional $25 million proposed to be infused in that right out the gate. And folks who are uninsured homeowners, which we do know that is an issue in a lot of these areas, right, would be eligible to apply through that program for assistance. Separate and in addition, they're also proposing a program to create a new tax credit that would allow homeowners who did have insurance to seek a credit in the amount of their insurance deduction. So want to highlight those as immediate pieces that are moving. Certainly at the state level, we need the state to do that for those to happen. But yes, long term, I mean, if it's anything under the housing umbrella, stabilizing your building, if it's a demo situation, doing that in a respectful way, if you're housing insecure, the holistic landscape, it's a need, we're aware of it, and it's going to be something that priority.
Thank you. I just think it's important to take the opportunity to speak to that, to, address that concern. I think in my mind, I'm just thinking still of all the pictures and images and can see just, all of the homes and all of the places. I know there are places across the city, including one that is now in Benton Park West with shelters and emergency operations. But I just know that those folks are bleeding for resources. There's, not enough. I had a chance just to make a very brief visit and have a conversation, and just they're struggling just to have the basics for those emergency operations as far as again, community is filling in a gap, but I'm just very much thinking about a sustainable model for doing these things, because these folks are going to be displaced for a long time. And then also when you think about those tenants being relocated, but some of those homeowners that might have to be relocated, if you didn't have insurance, if the home was passed down to you, you might not even have been paying a mortgage financially, because those homes have been in your family for X amount of time. And now you got to figure out a mortgage or another renter situation, and then you have all the emergency operators popping up. So, I definitely am just glad, and I just want people at home to know, we're thinking of all these things, working on these things, can see the immediate need. To me, it's both happy to see the community response, but also really makes me sad, because I could just see people were exhausted, they were burnt out, they were not in the best mental state. And again, as far as resources, having people to figure out how many fruit snacks this person can get, and where can these people sleep, and what's the maximum capacity of people we can fit in this building. We just do not have enough spaces for housing. We've had a shortage, but when you're talking about affordable family housing, now you're talking about all the renters, so I just wanted to make sure I put all of that on record to say whatever I could do to support, any of my colleagues whose areas have been hit, any of the residents that have been devastated, and just wanting people at home to know these are things are aware of and are thinking through, because they're not there for all of our conversations that we have and can't see when I'm hey, do you guys know about this? So I just wanted to hopefully put that on record and let folks know, this is just a first thing, an immediate need. It is not the only thing. It will not be the last thing.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I realize as you were saying that, that I also, it may be helpful just to share just some high-level general information about the FEMA aid piece when it comes to housing too.
I think that's great.
Yeah, so obviously, neither we nor the feds can guarantee any specific time frame. We have been moving very quickly with the support from the active support from the federal government, state government. It's been extraordinary partnership. There's two kinds of damage assessments that happen. The individual damage assessment, that's the piece that can unlock the individual fee assistance. And then there's the public damage assessment, and that's what is the aid to help cities repair their infrastructure. The individual assessment was Top priority, knocked it out in 2 days last week, which is remarkable. It truly is. Over the weekend, FEMA Region 7 went over the piles of data to put together the information the governor needed to declare, to request a major disaster declaration on the individual assistance piece. The public assistance damage assessment begins this Wednesday. They are very confident they can also knock that out pretty quickly for a similarly expeditious turnaround time to submit that to the president. Once should the president declare that a major disaster exists in the city of St. Louis, what that means is within a pretty quick period of time, a FEMA website, FEMA portal for the city for this disaster would open up so people can start registering their FEMA eligible assistance, which for a lot of people is going to be what happened to your home, you know? I think it's important to understand this is not the FEMA aid is designed to get people back to safe, habitable housing. It's not a total loss program. I know that there are other programs, though, that are run through the Small Business Administration that do become available. It sounds a little bit weird to say because you think this is a business program. SBA does allow they manage a very low interest loan program for people to get loans to start rebuilding homes as well. So we want to highlight that too as another resource. When you register for FEMA aid for your housing damage, an inspector will set up a time to reach out to connect with you. They'll come to your property. They'll work with you to figure out what your damage assessment is, and then within 10 days, individuals should receive just sort of an assessment from FEMA about, hey, here's what the overall damage is. Here's what your individual assistance is going to look like, from the FEMA side of things. So it's usually within 10 days, and then once that declaration is made, it's usually a pretty quick turnover to get that check, that direct financial piece from them. So that's typically how it's worked in other cities. So just wanted to put that out there, just because I know that a lot of people have questions about what that FEMA piece could look like. So as soon as we get more definite timelines, we'll be sharing with all of you. You all have been wonderful partners in amplifying information. So thank you for that. But I just want to make sure that there's a little bit of public discussion about what that FEMA piece could look like moving forward.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to embank.
Second.
Motion to embank was made by Vice Chair Sanye and seconded by Alderwoman Schweitzer. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sanye.
Aye.
Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
Chair Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
7 aye votes.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move to public comment. Has everyone who's interested in, I'm sorry. Alderwoman Schweitzer did have
Thank
another
you.
question.
Thank you so much. I have one more question, and that is regarding the section of the initial bill that says that the parameters of this fund would come back to this committee before the funds are actually expended. So it would have to, for the application, Department of Human Services with Employment Connection or whoever puts it together, and then it comes back to us. Just for a timeline purpose, do you anticipate that this bill needs to pass before we're starting to look? Are they going to be working on that this week, just in terms of, when we're thinking timeline? I do assume that this will pass by Friday. I think all of us on this committee are going to be lobbying our colleagues hard, and I'm sure you've talked to everyone already. It's one of the few bills I'm not worried about passing. I think we're going to get this done. But just making sure, that piece, are we having a hearing next week to talk about, about the actual parameters? Be interested in that.
I'll jump in and then I'll pass it to Ms. Millbrook. I would say, Director of DHS, Deputy Director, Ms. Russell, I think what we've been seeing over the last few weeks is a lot of collaboration and partnership and trying to do things all working hand in hand. And the goal is ideally to pass this out this week and pass out a committee, and then still work on some fine-tuned things and hopefully with some maybe more appropriations to make sure that there could be more funding for it. So I don't expect maybe in the next, week or two that this committee will meet, but hopefully after DHS has everything set up in place and work with Employment Connections, that this would be a program that can move very efficiently and quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah, To that end, I think my ask of all of you would be, just to maybe be on standby if we do need to notice up something next week. On our end, we are certainly going to work as quickly as possible to build out those details, which would include, what sort of documentation might a person need to be able to provide, confirming that, they were impacted sufficiently by this disaster to be displaced, and unoccupied. So I think if I could just make an ask of all you to at least be open, to noticing up a meeting, whether it's next week or the week after that, because I think it would be helpful also for the public and you all to be able to hear what those parameters are, how this is going to be implemented, and we'll work with DHS on getting a timeline as well as Employment Connections on a timeline. But just know that we are going to try and stand this up as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Thank you so much. With that, we'll move to public comment. Has everyone who wishes to speak on Board Bill number 3 signed in? And then everyone who wishes to speak that has signed in, if you can raise your right hand, I'll swear you all in at the same time to save on time. Do you all swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, we can begin with the list of speakers.
Our first speaker is Maya Petty.
I got it. How y'all doing? I just wanted to talk about my experience after
Sorry,
the tornado.
Ms. Petty, you have 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay. My name is Maya Petty. I don't know what ward I'm in, but I live off Del Mar and Union. Okay. So with this experience, me and my 2 children have been displaced, and it has been very, very traumatizing. But what makes it harder for me is, a lot of y'all don't know me, but Alicia can speak to the fact that I have been doing work for this city since I was 13 years old. I fed children for 3 summers in a row. I cleaned up Hickey Park when I was like 13. And this would be a great opportunity to see if the city can help me out, because my apartment is gone. Landlord is not responding. There's a tree on top of my car. Apparently, I have to ask the neighbors to move it. They won't move it. And so again, my kids and I were displaced. We're living in a hotel. They're 2 and 3. And so yeah, any kind of funds that the city could give us would help, because even right now, we're relying on the kindness of friends and strangers, and it's just no way for, I'm also 5.5 months pregnant, so this is not something I should be stressed about. This isn't something my kids should have to experience. So if y'all could pass this, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Petty, if you live north of Del Mar, I'm your alderperson, 10th Ward, so I want to make sure we connect so I can get you not only waiting on this resource as we legislated, but there's some other resources I can directly connect with this. Nice to meet you.
Next speaker is Alicia Hoyt.
Hey, I'm Alicia Hoyt. I live in Ward 8. Is that all I need to say for official? Okay. I met Alderman Rasheen Aldridge the day after the tornadoes up in O'Fallon Park, and we worked together for a little while, so I subsequently followed him on Facebook. He posted about this addition to the bill yesterday, and that you guys were accepting public testimony, so I just wanted to stand up and say that I am enthusiastically in support of helping the people however we can. Thanks.
Kristen Blackman.
Christian Blackman. I'm in Ward 6, so not an impacted. I know y'all know why I'm up here. So just want to reiterate, I'm sure stuff that y'all have heard as I've been on the ground on behalf of myself, on behalf of my church, St. John's Church, on behalf of my organization, Tennis Trainer Greater St. Louis, and really, again, stressing the need, like yesterday, for funds to get to tenants, specifically those in rent. And why I say that is because As a renter, you're really at the mercy of your landlord. So regardless of what the stickers say, for instance, we connected with some tenants specifically from San Remo Apartments, which has gone viral at this point. So for that particular property, one property did have the yellow sticker. The property across had a green sticker, but all the tenants were asked to vacate. And we talked to a tenant that was in the green building, green mark building, that also had to vacate. So I'm saying that to say, while we know we have systems in place that say, yes, this is what folks are supposed to be doing, this is how the system is supposed to work, this is what landlords should be doing, I just want to note the nuances in that, or note that sometimes things may not go exactly how they're supposed to be systemically done. And oftentimes, unfortunately, if folks don't have folks to advocate for them, and community has shown up in a big way. And I also recognize the city having to move very quickly too, but also want to know that there was a lot of balls dropped that community has lifted up a lot. And community should, right? Community gonna show up. But what I'm saying is that community has lifted up a lot and that we probably should not have had to do, to be real. Which is also just the educational component, because there was a lot of confusion about those things, what that meant. Tenants not having answers, not sure what to do, how they should be going about things. So again, I just want to lift that up. I want to lift up that we're doing within our capacity, and I'm sure all of the different respective organizations, individuals are doing their best to make sure that first we continue to do the rapid response piece, but then in the long term, I also want to note if other questions around if tenants are displaced, making sure they're able to come back to their homes, right? Making sure they're not away from the community and their neighborhoods that they want to be in, that have been impacted. So yeah, again, we're definitely for the passage of this particular bill to get more funds, specifically financial support to tenants that need it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I do want to reference, and I would love to speak with you afterwards as well, sis, because San Remo is 10th Ward. I didn't know it was viral because I haven't had a chance to be on social media, but I have been in direct contact with the property owner, right? And so I want to connect him with you all to make sure that he's meeting the needs, because that's exactly what he wants to do. So if you have to leave before the meeting is over, text me. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Marcel Higgins.
It's fine. I don't know what time it is. Good afternoon. My name is Marcel Higgins. I am the policy coordinator with Action St. Louis and a child of the 10th Ward. In my professional capacity, I just want to be clear in saying we support any legislation that tends to assist and help the people in need at this time. But one thing I do want to say as an individual, I have some mixed feelings. I know pictures have gone around not only citywide, but nationally around the devastation that has taken place specifically on the north and west side. But what I want to also remind folks is that the visuals that you see aren't just from disaster. It's years and years of disinvestment, years and years of non-support for the people in those communities, years and years of watching people like family members of mine that I had to help clean some of their family memories out of rubble, not getting the support and protection that they need. So, excuse me, as much as I am happy that now those folks may see some support in the near future from this city, I think now, in this time, outside of support, those people need to be protected. They need to be prioritized, not only from the city, but the state as well. Because a lot of those people, this means quite literally the end for them in their neighborhoods. This neighborhood will not look the same. These people's memories are gone. My memories are gone. So the thing that I am demanding today, outside of that support, prioritize those people, prioritize their stories, prioritize the history of their neighborhoods. Make sure you are supporting them. I want to remind you that just prior to this devastating disaster, there was conversations happening in this building around the insignificance of the Impacted Tenants Fund, the insignificance of the right to counsel bills. Don't do it, please. Protect these people, for me, please, for our orgs, for the people in this space and place that fight for these people every day. Show your support and show your willingness to prioritize and protect. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel.
That's the last speaker.
Alderman Aldridge, did any of our, do you all have any questions or anything follow up from the speakers? And with that, Alderman Aldridge, you're welcome to close.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First, I do want to uplift something that is not part of this board bill, but I think that is important to the conversation. And I've continued to say for the last several days that government moves slow. But what hasn't moved slow is the people that have been organizing and coming together. If it's been organizations or just everyday people that have been devastated by this storm, St. Louis not waiting on government to act, but actually coming together to support one another has probably been one of the most resilient things that I've seen since probably the Ferguson time. So I just want to thank all community organizations, all individuals that have, just, lifted up a hand to cut a tree. If you live in the devastated areas that have been impacted, or if you don't, people have really been showing, I just think, the resilience of what St. Louis, unfortunately, again, in a traumatic time. And I think the Alderwoman Sanye brought up a really good point. This bill is about addressing at least the needs for tenants, but I do want to say, with being in conversation in collaboration with not just Room 200, but also the President's Office, who I want to thank for working on this piece of legislation as well and co-sponsored it. This is one of many pieces that at least we're trying to look at as government to figure out the need and what we can do from a city agency to try to make sure that we fall in the gap of what the community has already done. So this may be directed towards tenants, but I know there's going to be a bill after this around property tax, and there's many conversations, as Ms. Millbrook said, from the mayor's office on the state level and also federal level of looking at all ways that we can help renters, landlords, and just at the end of the day, any and everybody, the seniors, some of just our own individuals that not only work at the board, but work for the city. Everyone has truly been impacted, and it's been nice to see the collaboration that is all coming together. With that, Madam Chairwoman, I would just ask for a due pass recommendation on Board Bill 23.
Thank you.
I make a motion that we pass Board Bill 23 with the due pass recommendation.
Second.
It was motion by Vice Chair Sanye, seconded by Alderwoman Keys with a call for previous roll with no objections. Congratulations, congratulations. Thank you all for all of your work on the ground. Board Bill 23 has passed in bank.
Thank you.
All right. Alderwoman Boyd, you are recognized on Board Bill 24.
Thank you, HUD's committee members, for hearing my bill. Could the clerk please read the introduction of my bill, please?
Board Bill 24, introduced by Alderwoman Pamela Boyd and President Green, an ordinance adopting the provision of Section 137.082 of the revised Missouri Code, providing residential property owners whose homes are severely damaged or destroyed by the natural disaster with a prorated reduction in property tax assessment, and adopting the other assessment provisions of Section 137.802 of the revised Missouri Code pertaining to newly constructed property and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause.
Thank you. I'm presenting this bill today because we are in a disaster time, and our city is struggling to try to ensure that we protect the residents, especially homeowners that's in our communities, of their property and their values. We do know that a lot of the properties were damaged and they lost everything, so they had nothing. So I thank the mayor's office and the assessor's office for coming forth, working with me in regards to looking at how we can reduce the property assessment because of the damage that was done to those properties. And they will be able to have some kind of relief until they can figure out which way they're going to go and if they're going to put new development on their property. And so on this bill, it has, it's targeting residential property that had tornado damage. And so it's under the occupancy law, which I was really shocked because I didn't even know about an occupancy law. So this was first time for me. And so I was excited when I heard about it because that meant that the people that own properties would be able to hold on to their properties but wouldn't have the assessment of high value on those properties, have to pay the price if the property was, before the tornado, if it was assessed at $200,000, if the property was damaged, it wouldn't be that cost. And so that was the purpose of this bill.
Thank you so much. This was an immediate response that I was asked about when I was on the ground day one on Saturday and had reached out to the mayor's office as well. So thank you, Alderwoman Boyd, for bringing this forward. I'm going to have some excited constituents to hear that we're trying to move forward in these efforts to aid them in this way. I didn't know if you wanted to have the mayor's office come up and speak
Yes.
prior to our questions. Okay.
Casey Milberg with the Mayor's Office. I will, first, I want to give credit where it is due. Assessor Ordway was pretty quick out of the gate with flagging this as a smart, practical, common sense, good, fair thing to do for people shortly after the tornado hit. So Mayor Spencer and our whole office and administration applaud him for getting this moving, for getting the research mobilized quickly with his assessor network to help us figure out the A to B on this. We're under a bit of a timeline. Got to get this done by June 1st to adopt it in order to give this guy the ability to help give our homeowners some relief. And for the finer points of property tax law relief, I will turn it over to our expert, Assessor Ordway.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Ordway. I'm the interim assessor for the city of St. Louis. Right after the storm hit, I kind of knew that this was a bill that the city had never adopted that might be something that might help. So contacted some of my colleagues across the state, contacted the State Tax Commission, and then from there got with Casey in the mayor's office. And the biggest thing about this one is there is a time frame in the legislation of June 1st to get it adopted. Some things that this legislation would do would be if a property is deemed to be uninhabitable or unoccupied, it would prorate the taxes basically based on when the storm hit. So they would pay taxes for the first basically third of the year through April, and then the storm hit in May, and for the rest of the year, those taxes would be prorated away. So in that, it won't help everyone. If a property is damaged, but the people were still able to be there, it's still occupied, it's still inhabitable, they would not benefit from this legislation, but it would help those that have been displaced and affected the most. It also does not apply to commercial property, so it is only residential property. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for stepping in and filling the gap this way. I have an immediate question, then one is twofold. One, what about if there's a property owner living in and possibly now out of their property as they try to rebuild their property, right? Mm-hmm. But does not have an active or recent occupancy permit? Are they still eligible for this?
That's a great question. I think we're going to have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. There is an application process that's required by the statute. We have gotten copies of applications from other counties. There's also a template application the State Tax Commission puts forward. And so I think we just need to be smart about how we do that. What we're really looking for is, have they been displaced? Was the property uninhabitable? As long as we can make those findings on a case-by-case basis, that would be what we would need to be able to prorate.
Thank you for the case-by-case basis reference, because that would lead into, I want to publicly advocate and have it on record to advocate that I have parts of my ward that were devastated, but because they were not under the prior Housing Conservation Act, some of them may not have active or current occupancy permits, but I can absolutely vouch that they live right in those properties. So anyway, I can advocate for those sections in those neighborhoods in the 10th ward, and I think there may be some in an adjacent wards. Please let me know so that I can help you work through that process so that they can absolutely be eligible.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Alderman Cone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Assessor, thank you for being before us today, and also thank you for flagging this with the Mayor's office, and thank you, Ms. Milberg, for your continued diligence in getting these things put together so that we can meet certain deadlines, and thank you to the sponsor for bringing it forward. I do just want to... I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. My primary question around this is, I understand that it's prorated, but what's the prorated basis? So is it you're only paying the assessed value for the period before the storm, and then what is the assessed value afterwards? Are you all doing a new assessment? What is that prorated amount? I get that it will be prorated, and the prorated date is based off of the date of the storm, but help me understand what that would mean.
So most of the prorations we do in our office are based on the number of months that a property is occupied or something of that nature. So in this case, let's just say you had a $100,000 house and you occupied it from January all the way through April. Then in May, it became unoccupiable. You could look at that as 1/3 of the year was occupied. So we would adjust the assessment so that it would be 100,000 times 33 at a 3rd%, and that would be what you would be taxed on for the entire year instead of $100,000. And so that's how the proration is going to work.
So it's basically taking a zero basis for the remainder of the year.
That is correct.
Okay.
Because the law requires that it be uninhabitable and unoccupiable. So it's considered a complete loss at that point.
Okay, but this piece of legislation makes it so that it's only for people who have been impacted by the tornado, because we do have plenty of vacant properties that are out there that don't have a zero basis assessment.
So that is correct. So in the legislation, it has to be due to a natural disaster. In the legislation, natural disaster means any disaster due to natural causes such as tornado, fire, flood, or earthquake.
Okay, and does there have to be the issuance of a disaster declaration? So executive order from the mayor or governor or president in order to make this effective? Is this legislation specifically just for this disaster, or is this for any disaster going forward?
A great question. So no, there's no requirement for a disaster declaration. There will be an application process, as we discussed, and this would be in place here going forward in any year based on any natural disaster that might occur. I also want to point out that the main reason most people enact this legislation is because it gives some sort of incentive for new housing construction. And so that's the main reason for this bill. It just happens to be the only place in law that allows the assessor to do anything in the case of when there's damage. And so the new construction part is not anything, I think that's probably why we'd never looked at it before, is because all of our new construction incentives through abatements are much more robust than anything you would find in this bill. So just want to make sure it's clear that there's kind of two things going on here. One is the new construction incentive, and then second is the ability to adjust property due to natural disaster.
Right. That's my primary concern, is that, I don't want folks who have not been impacted by this disaster to take advantage of this program. So my concern is that if this bill is not limited to this specific disaster, and that we don't have language in there that specifically requires it to be triggered by an executive order, a declaration at the state or federal level, then how is your office going to determine whether or not someone qualifies for this going forward? And so, as an example, we have regular torrential downpours now, and it seems to be happening almost every year, where I have residents who have basements that back up from the flooding that happens, the flash flooding that happens. And in some cases, I have had neighbors who have had either renters or property owners who have had to vacate their house for several days or several months to have it renovated. How would a situation like that be handled underneath this ordinance if this board bill were to pass?
Sure. So I think part of that has to do with how we set up the application process. So there's nothing in the law here in the statute that says there's a requirement for a disaster declaration. That doesn't mean that we can't do things internally within the city to put some guardrails in place in the application process. I think that's certainly something that we could look at. But as far as the legislation, once it's passed, as long as something was termed a natural disaster, then we would go to that application process. And if it was a natural disaster because of a flood, we would have to go through whatever parameters we've set up to see if that property qualifies under that natural disaster.
I guess that's where my question is coming from. How are we defining the natural disaster and within here?
So right now, all we can do is look at the law, and then from there, we'll have to see what we could do within our legal department or others that want to help us draft the instructions on the applications.
Okay. I'm going to support the legislation because I think it's really critical in the moment, and I know it's extremely time sensitive, but I do want to make note that I think this is something that we need to come back and address. I don't know if Ms. Milberg is still with us, but I definitely think that needs to be on our radar, because this is not a terribly long bill. I want to say it's 2 pages long with a couple pages on the appendix, but we don't have any definition around what that natural disaster is, how it's declared, how there's an application or kind of a synopsis with a fiscal note attached to the bill, but I think we need to be a little bit more specific so that outside of this current situation that we have more definition around how this can be utilized.
Of course, and thank you for the intentional way that you're thinking about this, Alderman. I assure you that we are wanting to be as thoughtful as you are in how this is implemented. Just because the state law requires just a on its face adoption of the provisions of the state law doesn't mean that it doesn't preclude us from working to really lean into the administrative authority, right? And so what I propose to be responsive to these pieces is providing that this is adopted, would ask the same of this committee that we asked in the prior bills to maybe be on standby for a follow-up hearing at which we can talk about the parameters of that application, talk about how we're anticipating it would work, see if there's any pieces from your all's perspective that might, that we might need to further build out. But if you all would be willing to be on standby for that, we do want to make sure that we're having those conversations, that there is that intentionality. So, and thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. I don't have any further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Slicer.
Thank you so much, and I agree, thanking all of the people working on this. I appreciate people moving fast to figure out ways to be helpful and what's available by law. It is interesting reading the Missouri state statute here because it feels like the disaster piece of it is an afterthought. It's the last piece of the statute. The entire, 1 through 6 of the statute goes through all the new construction, and then the 7th one is just also disasters. So I am interested in knowing a little bit more about how this could affect new construction, especially in areas that are thriving, that we depend upon them being taxed at the level that they should be. If someone's building a new house in certain parts of the city and it's a new $500,000 house, I want it to be taxed at that rate. So it seems like the state intention was to give those people a break, which unfortunately is not my intention. But I am interested in knowing a little bit more about, any unintended consequences of that piece. And I know we can't adopt just the disaster piece. That's not the way it works for this occupancy law. So I'm interested in hearing your perspective there.
Absolutely. So this only affects newly constructed property that didn't exist before. So it would not be rehabs. The vast, probably majority of our residential abatements often are rehab properties. So when it comes down to it, we have about anywhere from 30 to 100 new residential new builds, year built, current year. Out of those, I'm going to guess 90% or more are abated. And our abatements run 5 or more years. So what this would do would be much less than any of our abatement process would do. This would be, you build a house, the month after it gets occupied, it goes on the books. So instead of being abated for 5 years or 10 years, it may only be abated for a matter of months or a little more than a year or so before it would go on the books. So that's really not an incentive where we are, based on the way we've done business for many, many years. And I think that's why this probably has never come up before.
Yeah, go back to that a little bit. So this would, I'm trying to understand if you just said that if there is an abatement on new construction, if this would negate that abatement?
To say it would negate it, it would not negate it, but it wouldn't be helpful. So if you had a 5-year abatement where you're just paying on the pre-developed value, usually the land value for 5 years, if this were in place, it would actually suggest that you start paying much earlier in that process. So you wouldn't want to get rid of the abatement process as a developer or a homeowner and switch to this, because this is not going to help you. It's going to be much, much less of an incentive than all of our abatement programs.
But this wouldn't supersede the abatement process. So if someone has an abatement on their property, does this come in and say, actually, you don't, once it's occupied?
I think the abatements are pretty clear, especially like Chapter 99, Chapter 353, that it's very clear about how the abatement works.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it wouldn't be conflicting,
Right.
but I don't think it would be superseding.
That's interesting. Not conflicting, but not superseding. So who gets to make that decision? Okay, I'm going to think about that a little bit more, but I do plan on supporting this bill and would like to be added as a co-sponsor, please. Thank you.
So noted.
Alderwoman Keys.
Thank you for all your work on this. I don't really have any questions, but I would ask that we embank this.
It was moved by Alderwoman Keys and seconded by Vice Chair Sanye that we pass Board Bill 24 move Board Bill 24 and bank and with call for previous roll with no objections. Thank you. Keep moving forward. All right. Alderman Browning.
Thank you. Thank you, Assessor Ordway, for looking into this and finding a solution on the books in Missouri law. I think this is a good solution. I know I've had conversations with you about the need to do this because taxing people on a house that might not exist anymore is absolutely adding insult to injury. The other thing that I see as a bonus of this is that it's good to have some sort of incentive for people to build new construction as well, right? If a house is sitting empty after new construction and nobody's occupying it, that's not in the interest of the builder anyway. So, we're not really losing much, but when we're saying we're not going to tax it until it's occupied. Obviously, everyone that builds something, their intention is for it to be occupied. Mm-hmm. And as with a lot of government programs, I think sometimes people get caught up in the weeds about, I don't want somebody who doesn't deserve this to get this benefit. And, I would think that that's usually pretty rare, kind of like welfare abuse is pretty rare. But what I really want to make sure is that the people who really need it get it. And so I'm happy to support this bill because I don't think there's a section in our city where we don't need more housing. And especially now when we just lost thousands of homes, we're going to need to build like crazy. So I think people need to understand that we need to get out of our own way here. And this is a good way to provide relief, and so I'm happy to support this. And again, I just want to thank you for looking into this and doing your job so well. Since you've taken over for former Assessor Dauphin, you've just hit it out of the park, and I really, really appreciate the work you're doing for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Assessor, for being proactive and looking at our what we can do from the local level with what is on the books on the state level. But just so I'm clear, this would only, if I'm hearing you right, this kind of like abatement or assessment or whatever we want to call it, this would only be if somebody is building a new home, so not like rehabbing. My home has been messed up, during this tornado, and I'm able to rehab the home. This would not affect those individuals.
I want to make sure I understand your question. So there's two parts of the bill. On the new construction part, that's only for brand new construction, would not be for rehab, but it has nothing to do with the natural disaster part. On the natural disaster part, it's only going to affect those people that are properties that are unoccupiable, uninhabitable. So it would affect those, the most drastically affected. But if somebody had some damage, but it's still occupied and inhabited, they're not going to get anything out of this bill. But it's the only thing in the assessment world that exists.
I get it. I think you finding a tool in your toolkit that I think you're trying to help, and definitely at this point it is. I think what I say, is just all of us collaborating, trying to figure out every little piece of line from state and local of what we can do to try to assist and help in a time that, when this happened, nobody was expecting this happen. So I appreciate at least your ability to be proactive and to try to find, I think, one of many solutions that will hopefully, once this is all done, and it won't be done because we'll be rebuilding for a long time. To be very clear, North St. Louis was already rebuilding. This only just set a community back even more. But I appreciate the fact that at least within your department as an assessor, that you found something that can be part of the long marathon that we're going to be in to make some change and bring some positivity out of this traumatic time. Thank you.
Thank you.
It also escalates why I asked what I asked, because the window of opportunity for uninhabitable, right? I have homes that are uninhabitable right now, right, but that doesn't mean that the homeowner wants to break and leave their community. So that's why I'm asking and wanting to put it on record, see how we can make sure that we are able to advocate for those constituents who can't live in their homes right now, but don't want to leave, but absolutely need this tool in the toolbox for them. Is there a definite time to follow up on that? Is there a timeline for this, where this process will be open, and will it have a hard stop, or will this be going on now for months? Or let us know so that we make sure anybody that is eligible won't miss it.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a little bit of time just to get the application process, as Alderman Cohen talked about and as Casey talked about. You know, it's going to take a little bit of time working with legal department and others to make sure that we get the right application process, the right rules in place, the right guardrails in place. I could see that happening, you know, during the summer. And then from that point in time, anybody could apply. Tax bills still go out to the end of the year. So as long as, you know, those applications come in, I'm sure we're going to go look at each and every property where there's an application. We'll probably have building information from the building division. We'll probably have FEMA information. You know, we'll get as much information as we need in order to act on those applications. But yeah, by the end of the year, when we send the bills out, we'd want to have the applications in by that time.
Thank you so much. Vice Chair Sanye.
Thank you all for your work on this bill. Thank you to the sponsor. Thank you to the mayor's office. I'm still just seeking clarity. I'm a bit confused about, we keep revisiting this new build point, and I'm still trying to get clarity. So if I've been if my home has been in my family for 3 generations now, I'm not eligible for this.
You are, as long as it's uninhabitable and unoccupied.
Okay, so it doesn't matter about whether it's a new build or not. It's just about whether or not it was previously occupied and whether or not you can previously live in it now.
For the natural disaster part, that's all that's required.
Okay, I do want to just put on record my support for what Alderman Cohn mentioned earlier about the executive order. My serious flag would be that, again, I just think it's important to be transparent. You know, we did the SODC Small Business Grant Program, and there were some specific things that were left out. And then when it was time to change it, they didn't have the ability to, you know, they had to come back through the board because they had to make those changes again. Okay. And it also led to problems when, like, you know, once funds were being given and applicants were being chosen, it just made everything take a lot longer. It was a lot, like, I think there was a lot of confusion, not as much clarity on things. So I understand that we have to rush it, but I do like the idea of tying it to an executive order. I know we did Executive Order 81 or something like that. 82, 83, somewhere in there. But I think that it is good to tie it in because I really, you know, I just want to be honest. I do think there will be people that were not impacted by the tornado that will try to access these funds. And I think that's shameful, and I do not encourage that at all, but I think it will happen, and I think it's important that in the policy and the legislation, there's the proper language and safeguards that we can to make sure that the people we're intending to get these resources to can get it, and just in full transparency, you know, for example, the 7th Ward was not hit as hard, but I've had to have conversations and am drafting an email now to residents to explain, well, we were just as impacted as North City and West City, you know, we were hurt too, our tree is down, our power was out. I have to respond, and I'm drafting email, attaching pictures and saying, well, show me where you can find this kind of damage where there's blocks that have been desecrated. If you can find that in the 7th Ward, then I can, you know, appreciate that sentiment. But I'm saying that to say, like, I can see that coming up, and I do think it's important that there are whatever safeguards and rail guards within the legislation to prevent that from happening. I know we're on a timeline, so it might not make the most sense now, but I do think it's important that we're as proactive as we can with that.
I agree.
In terms of the difference, I think there is an important, and to get to that point, the law is pretty restrictive in terms of what the legislation looks like, the real powers in that application piece. And so what the law gives us the power to do is really build out that application piece and lean into our administrative authority. So in terms of what we can put in the actual legislation, it's just we adopt this city law. But then the real powers in that application side where it says shall build out the application, that process. So, but yeah, as part of that, absolutely, we want to come back and have that preliminary conversation with you all. And what I might further request, if you'd be willing to take this on as a committee, if you guys would help us build out those lists of questions, those issues that you guys, are hearing from your residents, so that way, it can be a more efficient process for us to start building out what that application could look like. I think that would be a great value add and help everybody get from A to B. So if you guys would be willing to put on as a committee and gather that piece, I think that could really help expedite the development of a form that really addresses out the gate as many of these issues as we can, that could make for a more efficient rollout of this.
I can commit to that fully. I will, get on it today and start putting
yes,
something together so that
I
we get to
trust
that.
in that. I do. Yep.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. I thought of another question while we were asking questions. I think this might be, it's all in the implementation as well, but if the property is not able to be occupied, they would apply for this first year. Is there an envisioned timeline that people would be eligible for the tax credit? Because if people just sort of abandon the property, the tax rolls go down. Is there some sort of that we anticipate putting in the application where, it's a 5-year limit to make it occupiable again, or what are your thoughts there?
So it would only, the prorated assessment would only affect this year. And then what's going to happen at the end of this year is our office, we're going to have to go look at every one of these properties, because as of January 1st, 2026, any kind of damage or demolition to a property is actually considered new construction. So we have to actually go out and value every one of these properties as of January 1st, 2026.
Got it.
Let's just say this year it was a $100,000 property. We're going to have it on for maybe $35,000 because of the damage. If we go out next year and nothing's been done, then it's just going to be $35,000, because
that's what it
where
is
we
now.
ended up. And so going forward, the only way that's going to increase is if work is done to the property.
So it is going forward, that would be.
Well, and I can't even
built
say it's going to
into-
be
let's
that
fix-
amount. It could be less than that.
Sure.
We could go out there and say, well,
It's
you
gotten
paid
worse.
on 35, but, it's
Right.
10 or 20. We just don't know yet. We won't know that, but it's quite possible. So the last piece of the legislation says that anything that happens this year due to doing the natural disaster piece, that the city can recoup that in the following year. And that's just part of the tax rate process.
That is an interesting point as well. So recoup it in the following year by the tax rate process. Does that put the burden on other property payers?
Yeah, so it would be a slight adjustment to rate to collect the amount of money that wasn't collected in the prior year due to the natural disaster.
Within some range
It
as
would-
approved by the voters.
Right, and it would apply to all properties in the city, not just a group of properties. So that's there. And then, it's just year after year after year. I talked to my cohort in Joplin, Missouri, Polk County, Missouri, where they've had recent tornadoes, and they just all say the same thing. It's a long road back. It's a long redevelopment process.
Right.
It's years and years and years, and so it's just going to take time to see how these properties respond after the damage has been done. If they come back, then we'll go out every year and reflect those assessments.
And it would be every year, not just a reassessment year?
So on new construction, it's every year.
Okay.
So if there's building permits, we'll go out and work those building permits every year.
Okay. Thank you for that information. That's
Sure.
really interesting. I would love to learn more about how it will be recouped or would be recouped or could be recouped. I think that's just an interesting piece in areas that didn't have the same damage, what people should expect to see based on the disaster that is going to, it's affecting all of us, even if we weren't in the most impacted wards. So thank you.
Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you. Just one quick question. So I was hearing Alderwoman Schweitzer inquiry. Would this be something, I guess, assessments for property, our own property? So those have already went out.
Yeah, so we're getting this question a lot, which is you sent me a notice a couple months ago and told me my property was worth more and now it's been damaged. What are you going to do? And the answer to that is there's nothing we can't do. So you pay tax, we all pay tax on what the property was assessed for on the 1st of January. Doesn't matter if it's your car, your house, your commercial building, we all do that. Property could burn down, be built back, something could happen to it, something else could happen to it during the year, and the only thing that matters is on January 1st, what is the condition of that property, and that's how the assessment process works. So for all the people that got, it's not good news, but for all the people that got notices, if they're going to appeal those notices, they're appealing the value as of January 1st, not the value with tornado damage.
So just for the record, they will, so as people are watching this and think like, oh, I'm about to get assessed or a change in my property, folks that was just impacted 2 weeks from the tornado, homes that are completely gone, still would have to pay what was assessed.
So again, this bill, if it's unoccupied and uninhabitable, this would affect those.
Even if they already got a bill.
They haven't gotten a bill, they've just gotten assessment.
They just got assessment.
So remember, the only requirement in this bill is it's unoccupied and uninhabitable. If that's the case, then we're going to prorate the assessment as long as they meet all the criteria in the application.
Okay, and the criteria.
There are many people that got reassessed who have damage that aren't going to meet that criteria. They might have some minor damage or even medium damage, but as long as they're occupied and inhabitable, then there's actually no relief.
Got it. So if the property is not habitable or unoccupied, once your department works with the mayor's office to figure out that application, this is something that they could benefit from this year?
This year.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Any follow-up questions? All right. With that, Alderwoman Boyd, you're recognized to close.
Oh, excuse me, Chair. I have a couple of people signed up.
Oh, thank you.
Testimony.
Thank you. Is everyone who signed up to speak here all signed up? If you are, please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Come on up, ma'am. Is it Ms. Carson? Is Ms. Carson the only one?
Yeah, the other lady's gone.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, my name is Tina Kramer. I have a unique situation. So I own my home in the 13th Ward. I was displaced due to fire, and I was in the 11th Ward, and then my family home is in the 10th Ward. So I'm all over the place. I'm all over the place. But I say all that to say this. My home in the 13th Ward caught on fire. So I know what it's like to watch all of your stuff disappear. We were directly impacted by the tornado in the 11th Ward. A roof came off, we have brick damage, it has been condemned. We can't stay there. We're trying to still get the roof tarped, and we're working, trying to get that done. My family home is in the 5100 block of Enright. The roof, the back part of the roof of that came off, got a yellow sticker. We're working to get the roof fixed. I say all that to say that I was born and raised in St. Louis. I moved to Oklahoma for a few years, and I came back and I bought my home in St. Louis. A lot of the times we look at these bills that are being put forth, and when it comes down to the application, the north side has been left in the dust, literally and figuratively. The young man earlier spoke about disinvestment. Major. Most of our money and tax monies have gone to the south side of St. Louis. It's not due to one administration, but several. We have watched the south side, whether it be Soulard, whether it be Manchester, all of the state streets used to be so terrible you never even wanted to go that direction. And that's from somebody from the north side and the west side saying that. Now you can go, you can be freely, you can walk those streets freely. I was down in Soulard the other day without a problem. And still on the north side of St. Louis, even before the tornado, we could not call the police and have an actual policeman show up. With that being said, we've talked about the bills, and I agree with most of what's going on with the bills. However, there needs to be a structured criteria. And we need to know what that criteria is. We can't just say we're gonna leave it open because that leaves room for other people to come in and take advantage of those criteria. And the people who live there, who want to stay there, usually get left behind. And they're left without their property. So that's what we don't wanna do. Especially the tenants. The tenants absolutely need to be covered immediately because there's immediate need. But when it comes to homeowners also, we have a lot of our elderly. That orange guy has already cut Medicaid, Medicare, and SNAP. So whatever extra money was had is now gone because it has to go to food, medicine, and healthcare. So we need to think about that when we're talking about who gets that money back when it
Kramer,
comes to
that's your
taxes.
time.
Thank you.
Was it, that, Ms. Kramer, were you able to finish your thought? I want to make sure you finish your thought.
Okay, and only thing I was saying is that when we talk about who gets the taxes back, many a times we've paid taxes on the north and west side, and we don't see that investment unless we go to the south side. Our schools are gone, our businesses are gone, so we have to ship our children in the middle of the night, dark, waiting on buses to get to the south side to go to schools. So we have to share that, just like we shared it when everybody else was benefiting from it, we have to share that responsibility when the north side is benefited from it. But please specify the criteria and the applications so that outside people who were not directly affected aren't benefiting while those who were directly affected get left behind. That was it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kramer. That was very important testimony to be shared. And I think the overarching, probably bottom line statement on that is what's been reflected in a lot of our questions here and what was reflected by the assessor is that it's going to be a case by case. So even the questions we've asked, and I know people are watching and it's hard sometimes to follow, even with the questions we've asked, you might not still be clear on if you're eligible or not eligible. Just know that all of us here are fighting and advocating for all of you all on a case by case as we move forward with this. Because again, I said it at the beginning, wholeness is going to look different for everyone. So again, thank you for sharing that very important testimony because it helps us as we navigate and move forward as well. Are there any other speakers?
That was our only speaker.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Boyd.
I want to thank, again, the committee for all the questions. But I think when we first started talking about this bill, that was the first question I asked. I said, what about people that have been slum landlords, have vacant properties, been sitting in our communities for centuries? I'm not going to even say years. How would they benefit? And they said they cannot benefit from that because I'm very clear. We have people that have 15, 20, 100 properties that's sitting in North St. Louis that just abandoned them, and they're going to try to take advantage of this. And so I'm glad the assessor said they will actually go assess the properties. They will actually go see if it was tornado damage. They will rely on FEMA to give them that information. I agree with Alderman Browning because he said we need to get from in front of ourselves so we can move forward. I do know that St. Louis has been hit drastically, but I keep saying, St. Louis, this tornado exposed things in our city, the same thing COVID exposed in our city. It showed that North St. Louis continuously was neglected, and then it came out in the open. So this tornado exposed it too. It showed that it was properties that people have been over here, as the lady said earlier, seniors that live in these properties. They can't afford to fix their properties up. I had one call me today and said her neighbor's roof came on her roof. And so now we're trying to figure out how we can get that taken care of for this lady. So people need to think about what we're doing and how we're doing, because at the end, as the chair said, this is going to be a long process. It's going to be communities. When you ride through areas where it's no houses left, they're gone. That's devastating. And so, as Alderwoman Keys said, we have a Katrina in St. Louis. And so now we need to bite this one piece at a time to address it. And so I ask for your favorable consideration for my board bill, please.
I make a motion that we pass Board Bill 24 with the due pass recommendation.
It was moved by Vice Chair Sanye and seconded by Alderwoman Keys with the call for previous roll by Alderwoman Slicer with no objections. Congratulations. We passed Board Bill 24 out in bank. Thank you. Do we have any resolutions for review?
We have none.
Does anyone have anything for a committee discussion? Any written testimony?
We have none.
All right. Any announcements? All members were present this morning, so with that, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's moved by Alderman Aldridge, seconded by Vice Chair Sanye with the call for previous roll by Alderwoman Schweitzer. Everyone have a blessed day. We are adjourned.